family moved to the Crawford area in 1998. And at the time I was a teenager. I was 17, 18 years old. And so I never went to school anywhere in the valley, but this was home between all of my schooling. So I went to India and came back, and went to Switzerland and came back, went to Mexico and came back, started at Colorado College and loved it, and came home for block breaks and brought many people with me to the valley. The very first block break, my first year of college, I brought Emily Hartnett to an apple pressing, and by my senior year of college I had met Phil and I did my master's program, and I brought Phil home for the first time. You saw the valley in 2005 probably?
Cool, that's when it was, okay.
Yeah, and Phil was happy and liked it here. And then we moved abroad again and went to Turkey and taught there. And after Turkey we came back, and that's when we taught for Vision.
Because I wanted to become a teacher too.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get into the program at CC right away. We had to like wait a year or something.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, we'll live here. This is a great place to live.
Yeah, so we lived in Crawford and we taught for the Vision School back when it was here in Paonia. And we offered a bunch of really fun classes and ended up getting a really great group of kids to come and be in our classes. We kind of fell in love with all those kids and families.
We're in their 20s now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that was 2007, 2008. And Phil was the bus driver and a teacher, and I was a teacher and then worked at Flying Fork on the weekends, so we were working all the time. And then we've come and gone a bunch of times since then. So after you got your master's degree, we went back to Colorado Springs and taught there. I got my PhD, finished my PhD coursework, and when it was time to actually write the PhD paper, we came back to Crawford and lived here again.
And we're living at your folks'
My
house,
parents' house,
in
yeah.
Crawford. They had like a little apartment on the side of their house
Yeah,
that we could live in.
right, which was great.
So we were like living closely with them.
Yeah,
And that was
yeah.
nice.
And Emerson was already born by then, so we came back after the PhD, and I wrote my whole PhD from here. So it was a great place to be writing a PhD without too many distractions. And after the PhD, we moved to Switzerland, traveled a bunch more, then came back to Paonia.
We kind of left America a little disillusioned about the culture and politics and all that stuff. We'd rather just be an expat or something. And if we were coming back to live here in America, we were like, if we're gonna live anywhere in America, we're gonna live in Paonia. It's like the most like
Yeah, it was the only place
small
Phil would
town
live
European
in America.
feeling place we know of. Like you're like, yeah, you recognize people,
Right.
and you go to the store and you see
Yeah.
10 people you know.
Right. We've done a lot over the years in the valley. So long ago, we worked at Zephyr's farm for Don and Daphne, and we worked for Jeff Schwartz picking peaches. And we, worked at Flying Fork and worked anywhere we could. And after getting more and more education, especially after the PhD, you worked for the high school. You were an aide.
Yep.
And I was working for a tutoring company, and that was 2016. And that's when we really decided that we wanted to create the Paonia Experiential Leadership Academy, which started in 2017.
So to answer this question, how have we been able to stay here? I feel like part of answering that has to do with income-based student loan repayment plans.
Yeah, you're right. We couldn't afford to live here for a long time, and then when policies were changed that you could repay your student loans based on income, we realized we could afford to be back in Paonia. So really for us, a lot of what has led us to leave and come back was for a while getting more and more education. really helped us to be able to come back and live here again.
Well, there was a time where we felt that our like education wasn't valued here or something. That was one of the reasons we were like, people don't care if we have degrees in this town. It seems like let's just leave. We're not appreciated. I think there's like this push and pull with this place where like you can write your own narrative about your experience here more so than other places maybe, and that like it has a strong effect on your experience here. So if we're gonna say nobody values us here, we should leave, then like that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did really run into the challenge once I had the PhD that I couldn't get hired at any local school, and that was hard. And that prompted us to leave until we decided to come up with our own school. And that was kind of how to move forward with that. There's sacrifices, that are made. And so we believe in this valley and we believe in this lifestyle, and that came at the cost of a pay cut or the cost of not necessarily being valued for where we would be valued with our education elsewhere. But we decided that it was worth it, just for the peaches.
Well, so it was really because you had your job teaching online that you were able to make a decent income and support our family that we could start the school in 2017.
Right.
We started the school in 2017.
Yeah, broadband internet, by being able to work. I was working for a tutoring company in California, being paid California wages to be in Paonia, which allowed us to start the school here. So that again was back to working full-time all the time. So we started the school with just 3 students and our little Toyota Sienna, and from August to November we did not have a location of the school. We just met at the town park or at Breadworks or library, yeah. And then thankfully Ed Marston stepped up and was a huge influence on us and mentor for us. And
he rented us a space in the Harvester building.
Yeah.
For a very reasonable price.
Yeah.
And he just he said that we reminded him of him and Betsy when they just moved to town, and how they had this kind of like go-get-em attitude. We're gonna change the world and we're gonna change this place or that sort of thing. So it was.
Yeah.
He just had like some heartfelt connection. I don't know. It's definitely obvious in how he.
Yeah, and we loved him. He was super helpful. We were super sad when he passed.
Yeah.
But he was able to see us succeed. He saw us start to expand and get more students, and eventually we had too many students for the Harvester building and had to sell our farmhouse and invest everything we had in a bigger property up on Lamphorn that could house the whole school. And now
our family together.
And our family, yes. Yeah. So we live currently at the school, and we now have we're now in our 6th year. And we found out today one of our students just got a full ride to Fort Lewis College, which is very exciting. So
cool. One little thing to add in there is so we had to sell our house and buy a new house and move in the summer between 2 school years, and you were pregnant with our 2nd son, Oberon, and
I was very pregnant, yes.
Yeah, and you gave birth to him on the first day of school. So that was just like momentous.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Yeah. Home birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, both our kids were born at home. I don't know, I just feel like that's cool to say.
Well, we had Lisha as a midwife and felt really confident having local resources. Was given great advice by Addie and other local women, and just Alicia was there and you were there, and it was great. As far as what changes we've seen, I think, it kind of bothers me when people talk about the good old days, because there was a time where, especially like that 2007, 2008, when there was like drug houses and you'd find needles at the park and things were getting stolen out of cars, and so many houses were empty right after the coal mines closed, and it was was not a thriving town. And, you know, property values, I remember when I went to college, houses in Paonia were cheaper than a year of college. And my mom was like, are you sure you're going to college? You know, you could get a house for 25 grand, 30 grand, pick up a house in Paonia. And so that's been a big change. You know, now I think some people kind of begrudge people who've moved here and made prices go up. But I really see the changes as so many properties are in such better states now than they were. And there's not the houses full of young transient people, there's not the same crime, there's not the same...
Although instead of young transient people, they're like young families.
Right.
With children.
Yeah.
Who, you know, value a safe community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean...
That's a nice addition.
Yeah, and I think there was a time where it was much more a retirement community, and now there's a lot more younger families that are interested in coming here to raise their kids, which I think really contributes to, you know, Harvest Fest and Cherry Days and all the things that make it feel like a sweet small town that thankfully have continued. You know, it was really, there were some times where those events weren't as big and exciting as they have been recently. Yeah.
Just talking about this, what does it take to live here question, I feel like you have to be creative to live here. And that's why we really like to support people that start their own little business. And I appreciate anyone who's trying to operate their own business here, because it is challenging and it does take creativity.
Well, I think there's also something of living in Paonia is being willing to be open and honest and vulnerable with your neighbors. I remember when we moved here with Emerson, we had come from living in Switzerland and I was teaching at Johns Hopkins and living in France, and it was really comforting to go to the bus stop and see people with duct tape on their jackets, because there's really not a focus in Paonia on having the latest, most expensive clothes or looking chic, and people are wise with their money and don't waste it, and aren't, you're not going to be judged if you come into something wearing the jeans that you wore to work. And I think we both really appreciate, I know I appreciated, like in the corporate world in Switzerland, I didn't like wearing high heels and makeup and nylons and suits and playing that whole game. And it was really nice to come back to a town where people are more down to earth.
Yeah, authentic. I was gonna say, like, I think this place develops slowly. I mean, I guess it seems like rapid to people who have been here for a long time. But I think people move here and are quickly changed by this place rather than changing the place.
Yeah. I do think there's a different energy in Paonia, and I don't know if Micah has talked about how the youths view this as a very sacred spot, and there's a whole host of people who tell you all the sacred spots nearby. But I think there really is something about, I would say, like reconnecting with childhood dreams almost, and childhood wants. I mean, I've talked about wanting to start a school my whole life, and it's here where it was actually possible for it to happen. Or, like Jen always wanting a piano and then getting here and buying a house and there was a piano in her house. There's like little serendipitous joys that you hear, and trials as well. I think that it's not an easy town for everyone, and there's certainly challenges that you face.
Yeah, but I think something that does make it easier is everybody waves at you when you're driving around in your car.
Yeah.
And that's something that changed me when I moved here. I was like, whoa, someone's waving at me. Oh, the next person's waving. Maybe I should wave back. Maybe I should become a waver. And now I'm a waver. I'm like, oh, they didn't wave back to me. They must be preoccupied with something else going on in their life.
Well, I love that. I'm sure when my siblings grew up here, they hated that everywhere you went you knew someone. And I think that's what we really love.
Mhm.
Like,
And people do gripe about that quality of the place. You know, if they've been here for a long time,
yeah,
they're kind of like, yeah, you're still new. You still sound like a new person talking like that.
so you wrote some thoughtful things here, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just back to that, like waving at people while you're driving by them. It's such a small, simple gesture that can make a community feel closer and more familiar. And like when I wave to everyone on the road, and most folks wave back, it just feels like I have something in common with them, even if like they have bumper stickers on their car that would declare otherwise. They still waved at me, and I still waved at them, and like we share a lot more in common with each other than we do with
Yeah,
these issues. Or
yeah, I would say that we have a lot more in common. And I also think that there's a humility that's available in this town of, you know, if you need something and you put it on the pay on your message board that you need something, there's no shame in not having it, whatever it is. You know, I ran into someone today who was looking for dog aspirin, and because we're so isolated and you can't just go to a Target or a Walmart in town, people are quick to share baby clothes, and I mean, like the women's clothing exchanges that happen here are pretty epic, and it's, I think, based from, it happens because there's not an excess of clothes and consumerism. And I mean, it's funny that, you know, Phil was saying that we really like to support local businesses. I always joke that there's some of the local businesses here are better than businesses lots of places in the world. I mean, Clemmy Treats are way better than most of the patisseries in Paris, and way more affordable and easy to access. And we love local wines and local ciders, and we love local cheeses, and just being able to go
don't leave anybody out.
No. Local artists, local musicians, I mean, one funny story, our son Emerson, at one time, we went to the East Coast, and he was sitting in the back of the car with this other 9-10-year-old boy, and the boy was listening to headphones, and he was like, do you know Dre? And Emerson said, no, do you know David Alderdice? Because David Alderdice is famous for Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
And
pay on your fame.
yeah, and he's also even said, like, one day I want to grow up and be a famous farmer like Mark Waltermeyer. You know, there's local fame that comes from producing things for the people in the valley. And I mean, he remembers during the pandemic when we went to Scott's house and bicycled over to Small Potatoes to get our greens, and knowing who your farmers are and where your food is coming from. You know, that question, if we were to leave the area, what would we miss the most? It's the lifestyle. It's the peach season, apple season, you know, knowing the seasons of the valley and talking with farmers about snow load and looking up at Lambourne to talk about how much snow is up there. I think there is a connection to place here where we all feel for the land. You know, like when we were here during all the fires, collectively it was hard on all of us, and the animals and the livestock, and there's a different degree of people caring for one another and helping one another. You know, I mean, I think I love it when there's cattle drives and you're stuck on the highway and there's cows going by, because I'm happy that those cattlemen and women are still thriving and are still in the valley, and often we're friends with them. You know, you'll be in the...
You're helping with the cattle drive.
Yeah.
Only a stick to block someone's driveway,
Right.
your own driveway.
Right, yeah.
It is funny you mentioned the message board as like as a place of collaboration and helpfulness.
Well, I think you get
You had the opposite experience on it too.
Sure. But I think what's really fascinating about the Pay on Your message board is there's thousands of people on that message board and not that many people in town. So there's way more Pay on Your voyeurism, you know, people wanting to be a part of it who aren't actually a part of it. And I think that's where, I mean, I love it. Recently even someone posted something and someone else was like, does anyone know this person? Is this a scam? And they were quickly outed. Like the town
It's very helpful, yes. It does. It's like a double-edged sword, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the town is so small that you know, there's benefits to that and there's drawbacks to that. When you have a conflict with someone, everyone knows about it, and it's a bigger deal than it would have been in a city. And when you're loved by somebody, there's way more support. And I'm in a women's group, and you're in a men's group, which is pretty special, and we love that. And I don't know that that would be available anywhere else to the degree that we have it here. We love that.
Or you at least wouldn't see those people that you share that time with out in your community as often as you do here. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe go to a group meeting.
Yeah, and
That's the only time you see that person. You don't see them
Right.
out and about otherwise, maybe.
yeah,
Can I say something about
Yeah.
what I would miss if I left here?
sure.
I can say we, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. We would miss the familiar faces, not just our friends, but all the folks we recognize here. We would miss going to buy pastries from Clemmy on Sunday morning and bumping into folks we know. And we'd miss the confidence we have in taking our eyes off our kids in the park when it's busy. We would miss the amazing landscape and calming silence of it. We would miss feeling like we're part of this community. And we would miss Pela, of course. We would miss our home. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting teary talking about this.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that for us, you know, if you would have interviewed us in our 20s, we were ready to travel the world and never look back.
Mm.
And it wasn't until we did enough of that we realized, like, I mean, Phil literally, when we were like, okay, anywhere in the world, where do you want to live? Phil was like, we can go anywhere, but if we're going to America, it can only be Peonia.